The mysterious mission. Commander Ethan Hayes stood at the helm of the operations room, the vast expanse of the galaxy unfolding before him. His commanding presence radiated authority, but his mind was miles away, focusing on the mission at hand. The large holographic display flickered to life, showcasing the crash site of a mysterious alien ship. It was located on Sigma 7, a barren, desolate moon orbiting a dying star. The ship's hull was a patchwork of alien metals and crystalline structures, a design unlike anything the humans had encountered before. Its size was enormous, dwarfing the size of any human-made vessel. It had crash-landed on the planet months ago, and intelligence reports suggested that it contained technology of immense value, something that could potentially turn the tide of the war. "This is a critical mission, Commander Hayes." General Clark's gravelly voice reverberated across the room, snapping Ethan back to the present. "The ship on Sigma 7 holds technology we desperately need. Our sources suggest that it is an Azurian vessel, ancient, powerful, and perhaps the key to our survival. Our engineers believe that extracting even a fraction of the data from its core could be a game-changer for us." Ethan's jaw tightened. The Azurians were a race believed to be long extinct, their ships scattered across the stars like forgotten relics of an ancient empire. But their technology had always been the stuff of legends. To have one of their ships within reach was a tantalizing prospect, and the strategic advantages it could offer Earth were unimaginable. Yet it was a risk, one that would take a highly skilled team to execute, a team that had to be carefully chosen. Ethan turned toward the general. "Sir, what's the team composition for this mission? Who am I working with?" General Clark's fingers moved across the controls, bringing up a new hologram on the display. The image flickered, and a new figure appeared, a humanoid warrior clad in a suit of sleek, gunmetal gray armor. The armor seemed almost alive, the smooth contours of its design absorbing light rather than reflecting it. It was like nothing Ethan had seen before, even among the various alien allies Earth had gathered over the years. The figure was imposing, yet there was an eerie beauty in its design, the sharp angles and smooth lines blending in a way that hinted at an alien origin. "This," General Clark continued, "is Spectre, an operative unlike any other. They are the best at what they do, and I have no doubt they will be indispensable on this mission." Ethan narrowed his eyes as the figure of Spectre stood tall and silent on the screen. "I've never heard of this Spectre," he muttered, skepticism clear in his voice. He trusted his instincts. He had to. His previous missions had taught him that a lack of trust could be lethal. But something about Spectre's appearance didn't sit right with him. General Clark gave a slight nod, as if acknowledging Ethan's doubt. "Spectre is a top-tier operative, with a perfect mission record. They've completed missions in environments we can only imagine. Their combat proficiency is unmatched, and they are well-versed in dealing with ancient alien tech. Their presence will be vital if we are to succeed in extracting the Azurian data. This is non-negotiable, Commander. We need them." Ethan wasn't sure what to make of the cryptic explanation, but his mind was already processing the mission parameters. "Understood, sir." He couldn't deny the importance of the mission, even if it meant working alongside someone he didn't trust yet. In the end, results mattered more than questions. The hologram shifted again as the general manipulated the interface, bringing up a new image of Spectre in full combat gear, helmet and all. There was no visible sign of their face, no hint of emotion. It was all business, and that made Ethan uneasy. "Fine," Ethan finally replied. "I'll make sure to work with Spectre, but we need to stay on the same page." Before General Clark could respond, the door to the operations room slid open, and a figure stepped inside. Spectre had arrived. They moved with a quiet grace, their heavy boots making no sound against the floor, their posture rigid and commanding. The figure's dark armor absorbed the dim light in the room, making it almost seem like they were made of shadows. Their helmet was opaque, and their expression remained hidden, giving nothing away. Ethan stood tall, his arms folded across his chest. "I assume you're Spectre?" he asked, his voice flat. The figure gave a curt nod, their voice modulated and almost mechanical. "Commander Hayes," Spectre replied in a tone that was devoid of inflection, a monotone that echoed the nature of their armor. "I look forward to working with you." Ethan couldn't help but study them more closely. Despite the imposing armor, there was a fluidity in Spectre's movements, a subtle grace that seemed out of place for someone encased in such heavy protective gear. The way they carried themselves, purposeful, deliberate, and calculated, reminded Ethan of the rare few he'd met who were truly masters of their craft. Still, that didn't mean he trusted them. Ethan preferred working alone. It had always been that way, ever since he'd taken command. There was something comforting about relying on your own judgment and skill, something unnerving about depending on someone else, especially someone as mysterious as Spectre. "You've been briefed, I assume?" Ethan asked, his gaze narrowing. A brief nod was the only response. Spectre didn't speak much. Their silence was unsettling, like they were deliberately holding something back. "We've got 6 hours until the drop window," the general said, breaking the tension in the room. "Prepare yourselves. This mission isn't going to be easy. You're about to step onto a battlefield of unknowns, and we need results." The room filled with the faint hum of the ship's engines, and the screen displaying the Azurian vessel flickered with new data. Ethan turned toward Spectre, his hand resting on the shoulder strap of his weapon. "We move out soon. I'll see you at the armory." Without waiting for a response, Ethan strode out of the room, feeling the weight of the mission settle into his bones. He had no idea what he was about to face. Spectre's enigmatic presence gnawed at his thoughts as he made his way to the armory. What kind of operative was this? And more importantly, what secret was Spectre hiding? In the armory, the usual rush of preparing for a mission took over. Weapons were double-checked, armor adjustments were made, and each member of the team silently readied themselves for the impending battle. Spectre moved with fluid precision, effortlessly donning their gear, their movements so practiced that they seemed more machine than human. Ethan felt a pang of doubt, but he pushed it aside. This mission was bigger than personal mistrust. It was about survival. Survival for Earth, for humanity, and for the future. He had a job to do, and Spectre would either be an asset or a liability. With a heavy sigh, Ethan checked his own gear, adjusting the straps of his pulse rifle. 6 hours. That was all they had before the drop pod would launch, hurling them toward the unknown. As they suited up and prepared for the drop, Ethan couldn't help but glance back at Spectre, who stood like a statue across the room, completely unaffected by the gravity of the moment. Who was this person? And what did they really want? "Let's get this over with," Ethan muttered to himself. The drop pod doors hissed open, and the time for questions was over. The mission was underway. Entering the Azurian ship, the journey to Sigma 7 was tense. Ethan Hayes sat in the cramped cockpit of the drop pod, his hands gripping the restraint straps tightly. The sounds of the ship's engines thrummed steadily in the background, the vibrations running through the pod, yet all he could focus on was the mission ahead. His mind was on the strange operative beside him. Spectre. Ethan couldn't shake the feeling that something about Spectre didn't add up. Every movement they made, every word they spoke, seemed precise, calculated. And yet, there was a strange air about them. An aura of mystery that Ethan couldn't ignore. Spectre sat across from him, their helmet reflecting the dim lights of the pod. They hadn't said a word since they left the operations room, their silence like an impenetrable wall. Their body language was stiff, almost robotic. Yet Ethan couldn't help but notice the fluidity in their actions when they moved. It was as though they were one with their armor. And that armor, it didn't look like anything Ethan had seen before. It wasn't human. The material seemed to shimmer and absorb light rather than reflect it. Alien, possibly. But that wasn't the most unsettling thing about Spectre. It was the way they moved, the way their eyes seemed to burn through their helmet, even though they couldn't see their face. It was as if they knew something Ethan didn't. The drop pod lurched forward, and the sudden acceleration pressed Ethan into his seat. His stomach churned slightly as the pod shot through the atmosphere of Sigma-7. The air outside was thin, and the landscape beneath them was a mix of barren rocks and jagged mountains, the moon's surface covered in dust, and the remnants of something far older than Earth's civilization. Approaching impact zone. The AI's voice rang through the pod, its monotone unhelpful in easing the tension that was building in Ethan's chest. The ground below the pod was rocky, uneven, and covered with sharp, jagged cliffs. The ship they were targeting was half buried under a massive layer of debris, its wreckage stretching across kilometers of rough terrain. Ethan could make out the silhouette of the enormous Azurian vessel. It tall, once pristine and sleek, now bore the scars of battle, the ship having collided with the moon's surface with the force of a dying star. "Stay sharp," Ethan muttered under his breath as the pod's thrusters fired, braking hard to slow their descent. Spectre's helmet tilted slightly as if acknowledging him, though no words followed. Seconds later, the pod slammed into the surface of the ship with a thunderous crash. The pod's magnetic clamps immediately locked onto the hull, the impact rattling through Ethan's bones. The ship's massive, ancient metal surface groaned under the weight, the air inside the pod shaking violently. But Spectre didn't flinch, didn't even move, while Ethan braced himself for the next series of events. It was like they weren't even human. Engaging breach protocols, the AI voice chirped, the pod's doors hissing open. Ethan grabbed his pulse rifle, ensuring it was locked and loaded before stepping out. Spectre moved next to him, their dark armor blending seamlessly into the shadows. The cold air hit them immediately as they stepped onto the alien vessel, the strange metal beneath their boots vibrating with the remnants of ancient power. The interior of the Azurian ship was nothing like anything Earth's forces had encountered. The walls were made of a strange, shimmering material, pulsing softly with blue and violet lights. Alien symbols, glowing faintly, ran along the walls, and the floors were lined with crystal structures that seemed to resonate with energy. The atmosphere was thick, charged with the remnants of the ship's once operational systems. "Stay alert," Ethan whispered. "We don't know what kind of traps they've left behind." Spectre nodded, the motion swift and almost too perfect. They were already moving forward, their steps soundless, as if the ship itself was part of their being. Ethan followed, trying to match their pace, though it was hard to focus on the mission with so many questions swirling in his mind. Where did Spectre come from? Why were they so skilled in everything they did? And why, despite the seemingly hostile atmosphere of the ship, did they seem so comfortable? As they moved deeper into the ship, the further they got from the drop point, the more unusual the ship's design became. The corridors were narrower, almost claustrophobic, as if designed to prevent intruders from reaching the heart of the vessel. Ethan could feel the weight of the ship's history pressing down on him, the silent echo of a once great civilization now lost to the void of space. But there was no time for history. They had a mission. Approaching the quantum resonance chamber, Spectre's voice, modulated by their helmet, suddenly broke the silence. The words sounded almost too cold, like a warning wrapped in fact. Ethan's pulse quickened. This is it. We need to get to the data core. But Spectre didn't answer. They simply moved forward with purpose, their silhouette fading into the dim corridors. Ethan had no choice but to follow. The deeper they went, the more oppressive the air became. There was an unsettling hum that reverberated through the ship's walls, an energy that seemed to vibrate in the air around them. The quantum resonance chamber was located at the heart of the ship, and as they reached the outer doors, Ethan couldn't shake the sense of being watched. The temperature dropped, and the walls began to pulse with a faint light that seemed to originate from within the very heart of the ship. "Watch your step," Spectre murmured, as if sensing Ethan's growing unease. "This chamber is unstable. We don't know what's inside." The door to the chamber slid open with a soft hiss, revealing a vast, crystalline space that stretched beyond the horizon. The chamber was immense, larger than anything Ethan had ever seen, with jagged, glowing crystals reaching toward the high ceilings. It felt alive, as if the ship itself was breathing. A soft hum vibrated through the floor, sending a strange shiver up Ethan's spine. In the center of the chamber stood the core. It was an enormous crystalline structure that pulsated with an eerie light, its surface shifting and changing, like the heartbeat of the ship. At first glance, it looked like nothing more than a glorified power source. But Ethan knew better. This was no simple battery. It was the heart of the Azurian technology, the key to understanding their vast power. Spectre moved toward the core without hesitation, their body flowing through the air as if they were one with the environment. Ethan watched in awe, his mind trying to process just how fluid and graceful Spectre was. They had reached the core in moments, their hands moving with surgical precision as they interfaced with the machine. It was as though they had done this 1,000 times before. "Now," Spectre said, their voice almost a whisper, "we extract the data." Ethan stepped forward, his gaze scanning the chamber for any threats. The air was thick with energy, and he couldn't shake the feeling that they weren't alone. Something about the room felt wrong. Before he could react, the doors to the chamber slammed shut, trapping them inside. The lights flickered, and the low hum of the ship grew louder. A harsh, mechanical screech reverberated throughout the chamber as a series of glowing panels on the walls activated. Spectre had barely a moment to glance at Ethan before the first wave of defensive drones burst through the walls. Ethan didn't hesitate. Defensive systems active. Get ready. Spectre was already in motion, their body moving in fluid arcs as they leaped toward the drones. It was like watching a deadly dance, each movement calculated, precise, and yet almost graceful. Ethan fired his pulse rifle, taking down 2 drones with expert shots, but the rest kept coming, their weapon systems charging. "We need to finish this now," Ethan yelled. Spectre glanced over at him, their helmet reflecting the glow of the drones. This is just the beginning. The battle raged on as they fought together, the chamber becoming a blur of flashing lights, sparking debris, and the constant hum of the Azurian technology. Ethan had never seen combat like this before, and he knew that the strange operative beside him, Spectre, was unlike anyone he had ever worked with. But there was no time to dwell on it. The mission was far from over. They still had to uncover the true power of the Azurian ship, and if Spectre had anything to say about it, they'd be facing even greater challenges ahead. The secrets of the Azurian ship. The battle had ended, but the tension within the Azurian ship had only just begun to settle. The dust of the skirmish still hung in the air, mingling with the faint smell of burnt metal and ozone. The sound of sparking drones and the soft hum of the ancient ship's machinery was the only thing that filled the silence. Ethan Hayes wiped the sweat from his brow, his breath coming in short bursts as he scanned the wreckage. The drones lay scattered, their broken pieces flickering weakly as if struggling to keep their systems alive, but they were no longer a threat. Next to him, Spectre stood motionless, their helmeted face fixed on the crystalline core at the center of the chamber. They had barely broken a sweat during the fight, their movements so fluid and effortless it was almost as though they had known exactly what would happen. Spectre was an enigma, and with each passing moment, Ethan found himself even more intrigued by the strange operative who was now his partner on this mission. "Spectre," Ethan began, his voice low as he stepped closer to the still active core. "How do you know how to control this ship's systems so easily? You've been working with this technology for years, haven't you?" For the first time since the battle began, Spectre's movements slowed. Their head tilted ever so slightly, as if contemplating the question, before they responded in that eerie, modulated voice. "My knowledge of Azurian technology is a part of who I am." Ethan's brow furrowed at the cryptic response. There was something unsettling about Spectre's words, as though they were hiding a deeper truth, one that he wasn't sure he was ready to uncover. The chamber around them seemed to pulse with a life of its own, the alien crystalline structures flickering in response to their presence. The energy from the core seeped into the air, swirling in patterns that felt almost like they were communicating with the two operatives. Ethan was still trying to wrap his mind around the ship itself. The Azurians had been lost to history, yet this ship, this ancient marvel of engineering, was a testament to their power and sophistication. "We need to access the data," Spectre said suddenly, breaking the silence. "Before the ship's systems activate a full lockdown. There is more here than you realize, Commander." Ethan looked over at Spectre, his heart pounding in his chest. "What do you mean? What are you not telling me?" Spectre didn't respond immediately. Instead, they stepped forward, their movements as graceful and silent as ever, and began interfacing with the data core once more. Their armored fingers tapped against the alien symbols on the surface of the core, triggering a sequence of events that Ethan could barely follow. The chamber around them seemed to come alive as the ship's long-dormant systems slowly powered back up. Ethan's pulse quickened. "Spectre, what are you doing?" But it was too late. The chamber began to shake violently, and a low, deep hum vibrated through the walls. The floor trembled beneath their feet as the core reacted to Spectre's touch, its energy surging in response. A series of massive, glowing panels on the walls flickered on, casting the room in an otherworldly light. "This is the quantum resonance chamber," Spectre explained calmly, as if all of this were routine. "It contains not only the data you seek, but the essence of the Azurian race itself. It is more than a mere power source. It is their legacy." Ethan's eyes widened as he realized what Spectre was implying. This was no ordinary mission. The stakes had just risen exponentially. What kind of technology could house the essence of an entire civilization? As the hum grew louder, the ship seemed to wake from its slumber, the once dormant machinery now active and alive. The crystals in the walls flickered with a strange energy, their surfaces shimmering in a myriad of colors. A low, mechanical voice suddenly filled the chamber, its language incomprehensible, but oddly melodic. "We're not alone," Ethan muttered, instinctively reaching for his weapon. His grip tightened around the pulse rifle, but Spectre moved faster, their movements like lightning as they scanned the area. "We're never alone, Commander," Spectre replied cryptically, before turning back to the core. The Azurians never truly left. They uploaded themselves into this ship's quantum network. They live on in the ship's databanks. If we're not careful, we could become part of it. A chill ran down Ethan's spine at the implications. If the Azurians had found a way to upload their consciousness into their technology, it meant that the ship itself was not just a vessel. It was a living, breathing entity. It was an artificial intelligence, yes, but it also seemed to be something more, a reflection of its creators, the minds of the Azurians preserved forever in the ship's core. "Can we shut it down?" Ethan asked, his voice tight with urgency. Spectre's response was calm, but there was a note of concern in their voice. "Not easily. The resonance chamber is linked to every system in the ship. If we try to disconnect it, we risk triggering a catastrophic shutdown. The entire ship could implode, and we'd be caught in the collapse." Ethan gritted his teeth, his mind racing. They needed the data, but they also needed to survive. The mission had just turned from a simple data extraction to a fight for their very lives. Spectre was right. If they weren't careful, they could very well become part of the Azurian consciousness themselves. "We need to access the central control room," Ethan said, his voice steely with resolve. "We have to get to the command center and figure out how to neutralize the ship's systems before it's too late." Spectre nodded, their gaze fixed on the flickering energy conduits in the walls. "Agreed. But be prepared. We will not be alone for long." As they made their way deeper into the ship, the atmosphere grew even more oppressive. The walls seemed to close in around them, the ship's ancient systems coming online with a low hum that filled the air. Every step they took was accompanied by the eerie whisper of the ship's power flowing through its crystalline veins, its presence palpable in the very air they breathed. Ethan could feel it, like the ship was watching them, waiting for them to make a mistake. They moved swiftly, navigating the winding corridors, and avoiding the numerous traps set by the Azurians to protect their most valuable secrets. Ethan's heart raced as he realized just how far the Azurians had gone to ensure that their knowledge would never fall into the wrong hands. Every system, every piece of technology, was an extension of their will. The ship was more than just a vessel. It was a fortress, a prison, and a tomb all in one. As they reached the command center, the doors slid open with a soft hiss, revealing a massive chamber filled with control panels and glowing interfaces. In the center of the room, a holographic projection of an Azurian appeared, its form ethereal but imposing, like a ghost of the past. It spoke in a language that Ethan couldn't understand, but the meaning was clear. The Azurian eye was alive, and it was not pleased with their presence. "We're not alone," Ethan muttered, his grip tightening around his rifle. Spectre stepped forward, their voice steady. "We never were, Commander.